only see the um, boxes I have all over my um, computer. So I'm imagining that there are faces around, doing my best with my imagination. So welcome. We have over 120 people registered tonight, which is, I don't know, for those of us in the neurodiversity affirming community, this is really exciting, just to see the outpouring of interest, and I hope that it continues. Um, a little bit about me. Kelsey already mentioned that I'm a marriage and family therapist. I run a private practice both in New Hampshire and here in Olympia. I moved here a couple years ago, about 2.5 years ago, and still getting to know the community. But I've felt really fortunate to be here, and I have opened up running a parent community through a side business called Secure Parenting, and I also provide parent coaching. So let's see. In terms of my interest around being a neurodiversity affirming caregiver, it naturally morphs into my work. So I feel really lucky. There's no other way to say it. Really lucky that I can pair both my professional interest and my personal interest together. My big why, I guess, for doing this work is to be the best parent I can be to my own children. I have two neurodivergent kids, 18 and 9 ages. And it's been a long journey for me as a caregiver and has fueled my passion to bring simple ways to support neurodivergent young people into homes all around. I work with a lot of families and absolutely love having these conversations. So I hope that you find some of this information helpful. It will all be available on the Olympia Education Foundation website, so that if you have to duck out early, feel free to grab that. Can watch the presentation at a later date. You can download the materials. And I'm also going to have a resource sheet available for you with some books and some other ideas for resources going forward. All right, so I want to start this by just sharing a little bit more around my own experience, experience as a caregiver. I mentioned that I have neurodivergent kids, and I've been at this quite a long time, over 18 years, and on the East Coast and now on the West Coast. And I have observed a lot about how systems work with complex children with complex needs. And as a professional, I've started a lot of different conversations in a lot of different spaces about this. I was in a meeting yesterday, and it was started out with a question around, sharing a high and a low. And it got me thinking about tonight's workshop. And I thought, that might be a nice way to start out this conversation with you all. So I wanted to share a low. And this was, I was trying to think earlier, it was about 3 years ago now, because my oldest has graduated from high school. But at the time they were a sophomore, and they shared with me that they had been in a classroom and had been forced to give a presentation while they were experiencing a panic attack. And I asked some clarifying questions about that and found out that they had been hitting their head against the wall in the back of the classroom for several minutes prior to giving their presentation, and the instructor of the class forced them to continue anyway. And of course, as a parent, you hear these stories and you think, I must be missing something. There has to be something else to the story. But the more information that I got, the I guess more discouraged I became, because I learned that I wasn't missing anything important, that essentially my child had been forced to do something while they were quite unwell. And I just thought to myself, we need to provide some more education around young people in the nervous system and what they need. So that was a low point for me, and really just fueled my interest to have these conversations. And then I want to follow up with a high, because it's always good to leave on a high note here. My younger child, who's now 9, was out of school for about 18 months. And during that time, this was through 2nd and 3rd grade. During that time, he was asked to become a volunteer at a local comic book shop. And he ended up getting his own lanyard and a name tag and becoming their Pokemon expert, and worked 2-hour shifts, considered himself a full-on employee, and was included in their staff conversations. And I would often observe him working and feeling confident in that position, and wonder to myself, what planet am I living on where an 8-year-old at the time, unable to attend school, was somehow working as a clerk at a comic book store. It's the type of experience that you kind of want to pinch yourself and ask, like, how is this happening? And how fortunate am I that we have this opportunity during a pretty low point for us and our family, struggling with a lot of challenges. So that was a high for me. So anyway, I'm here because this is very personal to me. And I hope that in some measure, this is a comfort to you all, just to feel seen, hopefully heard through the chat. I know it's a webinar format, but trying to make this as accessible as possible for everyone. And maybe walk away with some tips. I mean, that would be really, truly ideal, is if you walk away with some actionable steps that you can take in your own homes, and in the surrounding areas that you frequent. Before we started here, Kelsey made a comment that I wanted to share. I thought it was really great around stories staying here and lessons leaving here. And I want to just share that some of the information that we might talk about tonight, could include some vulnerable sharing. And I want to respect everyone who's present. And if we could all as a community keep these stories here with us tonight, and feel free to pass along any lessons that you learn, that would be great. Okay, so let's go. I appreciate you listening to my little intro there. I have a screen share that I'm going to get going, and we're going to get started. I am going to do this. Darn it. There we go. Okay.
Looks great. Good to go.
Fantastic. Okay. Becoming a neurodiversity affirming caregiver. Welcome, everyone. I think we covered that part. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Oops, I already messed up. Hold on just a second. Okay, a few things. I just want to make a note. I've been doing my own research and learning for a long time, but I also feel like the information that I could have presented a year ago would not be the same information that I'm presenting tonight. And the information I'm presenting tonight will not probably be the same that I will present a year from now. And so I want to just remind everyone, this is an area where research is coming in all the time, and keeping it relevant and current is really important. So this is a snapshot. Learning is ongoing, and your feedback and collaboration will help this workshop grow and improve. I really want this to be, co-creation. And again, this hopefully goes without saying, but this is a loose blueprint for those in caregiving roles. There are a variety of variables that will impact how you may or may not use this information. And I want you to take what works. And please feel free to leave the rest. I remind myself of this a lot. Families and caregivers, parents are doing their best with the resources they have. And I think it's very important to respect other people's choices when it comes to caregiving, and assume positive intention. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first few slides, I will say, are going to be just some terminology. I feel it's important with neurodiversity and neurodivergent, neurodivergence, and paradigm. There's all sorts of terms, and sometimes I get a little mixed up with them. And so I'm just going to go review those really quickly, and then we're going to have that foundation laid, and then we're going to move into the actual workshop for tonight. Okay. All right. Affirming terms, laying the foundation. Neurodiversity, we've all heard the term. That's why we're here. Of course, Judy Singer, she brought this term to life in the 90s. I think we can all agree that diversity is a good thing. There's a movement and a paradigm, and the movement is capitalized. The paradigm is not. That was my takeaway when I learned about this. I was like, oh, crap. I got to make sure to capitalize the movement. Let you read that real quick. I also want to make mention, I am a big fan of not recreating the wheel. I find that if I can locate the information I'm looking for and someone else has created it, I am all about that. I am giving credit here to Dr. Nick Walker. Nick Walker goes by she, her pronouns, and I find her work to be incredibly valuable in, especially around the terminology and sorting these things out. So if you're interested, like I was, feel free to go to her website. All right. And now the big question. Whoa, what is neurodivergent? Well, here you go, guys. This is the most comprehensive list that I could find. And then add like a bunch more, right? Because it just keeps growing. And there is also the difference between innate neurodivergence versus the neurodivergence that comes from experience, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, outside in, dyslexia, inside out. So there's also multiply neurodivergent, which I think is a really important term for folks that have more than one condition under the umbrella. I love the umbrella too. It's perfect for a night like tonight. I thought, oh, wow, how perfect, right? And again, I circled this, not an exhaustive list, just so that we're clear on that. Okay, let's get to the nitty gritty. Neurodiversity, affirming caregiving. Okay, here's my huge call out and huge gratitude to the livedexperienceeneducator.com. Sunny Jane Wise, they have a wonderful website and I refer to it. I send clients there. I find their visual supports very helpful for my own research and obviously, like I just said, for just sharing with others. So I have grabbed some good chunks of information from Sunny Jane Wise, and I will be always indebted to them for that. Okay. We're going to be moving through these 5 principles. Okay, so there's Sunny Jane Wise has a huge long list for the clinician. Okay, so I took this list for the clinician and I thought to myself, out of all these principles, which ones are the most relevant, at least through my perspective, for a caregiver? And I condensed the list down to 5. And then I kind of added what I felt was the most important parts of those 5 principles. Again, I want to go back to like, this is a snapshot in time, and I've done the best with what I know to date. There are, I'm sure, a bajillion people in the audience who know more, and huge respect, right? So if there is more that you want to share or add, I welcome you. Again, thinking of this as a collaborative endeavor and a conversation for our community. Okay, so we're going to roll into the first one. Okay, so respect autonomy. I think, I don't know about any of you, there's a lot of talk about autonomy right now, especially with PDA coming through. PDA is the exact wording is pathological demand avoidance, but right, that's kind of within the medical model. Really look more to the affirming terminology, which is the persistent. Now I'm going to forget. Somebody can put that in the chat for me. Persistent drive for autonomy. And so looking at autonomy as a really, really important principle for the caregiver to be aware of, because autonomy, I think we can all agree, is not necessarily a tenet that we place highly in our society, especially for children. And so a lot of families that I have worked with often ask me like, well, where do I start? And is that even good for my child? I mean, I should be the one leading the charge. And, I respond to everyone with the same thing, which is, you really have to determine what you're willing to share with your child and where you're able to collaborate with them. But autonomy is undoubtedly a really important area that we want to play with as a caregiver. We want to really play in this landscape and identify area where we can say yes. And so I call it yesing. And my clients will say like, oh yeah, the yesing, right? The yesing. And so this is a mindset that I have to get in quite often with my own children, which is I challenge myself each day to say yes as often as I can. And I also challenge them, right? I challenge them to say yes as often as they can. And so we yes a lot in our house. And now I'm so attuned to yesing that I often hear no very quickly in surrounding areas, and it catches me and I go, oh yeah, that word. Okay. So the way that I've designed this is that we're going to move through these 5 principles, but each one is going to be separated by this slide that I'm telling you is kind of like an explosion of words. And my apologies for that. However, I wanted to put everything on one slide. So the next slide coming up has a lot of words on it. And for that reason, I'm going to pause and let you read through, and then we're going to move to the chat. And I welcome anyone who wants to talk with us tonight about autonomy. If there are questions, if there are examples from families around how they're practicing respecting autonomy for young people, neurodivergent young people. And then after we're done there, we're going to move on to the next principle and then the next full slide of words. And so we're going to follow the same pattern throughout the rest of the workshop, so you know what to expect. Here we go. Boom. Take a minute to read through, and then I hope to hear from some of you around what comes up for you. as you can see, I offered some examples of things I've heard from clients or things that I've myself practiced around with autonomy friends, anything I could think of, I just threw on the right side of the slide to get the conversation going. I can, of course, talk all day about how I've interfaced with autonomy in my house, but I'm curious to hear from others. So how do you create space for autonomy in the home? Possibly with extended family when you're not in the home, with your friends. If there are, school staff, I know that this is really tricky to do in the classroom and in these different systems. But yesing can really be about the small things also. Anyone agree with Kelsey? Yes, I can. A difference for how you approach this when you're on your own than when you're with others. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that's funny that you mentioned that, Kelsey, because I always try to remember when I'm out in public, like, this is what you do for work. You may have people around who are looking to you, and I'm like, I do not do this all the time in my personal life. I try, but yeah. Thank you for an OT to talk about this, Samantha. Yeah. So moving their body. I used to do hugs. I used to hug my kids. And I never thought anything of it. And then my oldest really called me out and said, please stop touching me. And it took me back, but I realized, wow, okay, this is a good lesson for me in respecting their autonomy. And so just tonight, I had to hold back from giving one of my kids a hug because they did not want me to be near them. Yeah. Okay, so does anyone need some tips on how to talk about autonomy with extended family? This comes up a lot. I was just having a conversation actually with a client earlier today about this one. All right. Yeah, kids are all so different. Right, that umbrella is a big one. Yeah. Right. So I like Zach, like talking about just the observations, right, around each child being so unique. Some kids really thrive, let's say, using structure as an example, some kids really thrive with structure. Some kids become so overwhelmed with structure and a visual schedule that they will melt down. So really understanding autonomy is directly connected to the young person that we're talking about. It's not going to look the same for everybody. I mean, the nuances of that, I think we could all agree that some bits of autonomy are the same for everybody. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move along because I want to get to the next principle, but I can definitely provide some more tips on that in the resources if folks are interested, especially around talking with family and friends about that. Thanks for those of you who weighed in. All right, so the next one is, why is it not coming up? There it is. Validating differences. So as we know, there's such a huge range of neurodivergences in individuals. And so the differences that we're talking about here are vast, right? There's any number of differences. And how do we validate them? We always want to try to prioritize this, like celebrating differences if we can, for young people so that they don't feel somehow broken, bad, or wrong. I know that some of the differences can be really challenging. So some kids may at times feel wrong or bad. I often try to use their language and validate that if that's how they're feeling. I also want to make a note here around differences. And a mom pointed out to me recently, she said, differences are great when your child is gifted, an exceptional learner. Differences are great, from the outside looking in, talking about certain differences being celebrated and other differences being, things that we are ashamed to talk about. But differences are just that, different. And so getting away from this good versus bad, I'll share this, but not that. I mean, of course, we don't want to be disparaging, but there's a huge range in how neurodivergent young people develop. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this here. So I'm not sure if any of you can relate with some of these examples. Or maybe you have your own list of differences that you observe in the children in your life. I get a real kick out of working with neurodivergent young people because of this particular principle, because they're all so incredibly different and unique. And one of my first questions is always, what are you into? What do you really love talking about, thinking about? And in, without a doubt, I get to hear the coolest stories about everything from engines to weather patterns to recently it was creating eco bricks for coral reef conservation. I hear some really incredible stories from young people about some of their differences, and I absolutely love it. Is anyone willing to share some of the differences that they have experienced in their neurodivergent young person? Also alarms, definitely. Yeah, I know for us, we've gone through dinosaurs. I mean, just talking about interests here, but of course, there's many other differences, but like interests alone are really fascinating. I've also, I think that there's a fair amount to say around validating the differences between the caregiver and their child, or in the child that they're taking care of. that's an area where I have to work really hard around, especially because my older child has some interests or um, differences from the way I was at that age. And I have to constantly remember that they are not me and they do not have to do anything the way I did. Yeah. Okay. So noticing differences between young people. And there's a certain I call it the veil starts to lift in elementary school, and kids start to notice differences between themselves and peers. And so that's rich for conversation sometimes. Yeah, look at all those periodic table. Yeah, fans, vacuums. Yeah, 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 yeah. Look at all those differences, Audrey. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, yeah. And then we see, between a caregiver and a child, there can be a shared diagnosis and a completely different experience of that. Yeah, amazing women in history. That's great. I love it. Yeah, so differences in temperament, differences in interest, difference in preference, difference in need, difference in learning, difference in communication, difference in um, flexibility, difference in frustration tolerance. There's so many areas that we can talk about, different domains and all the differences. I have two kids. They share diagnoses. They are incredibly different from one another in how they interface with the world. And I am always amazed that they are from the same parents. All right. Um, let's move along to the next one here. Reframing expectations. Ah, I don't know. I feel like I could do an entire workshop on this one. So the third principle for the caregiver is how willing we are to shift our expectations from what we believe should be happening and move toward acceptance of what is happening, right? And going forward from there. So I thought a lot about how we come to have the expectations we do, how they're informed. A lot of us refer back to, well, when I was that age, right? So more recently, mine was, well, when I was 15 and a half, I couldn't wait to get my driver's permit and I couldn't wait to drive. I was so excited to have that independence and to get behind the wheel. And, so that informs, some of what I had expected to happen for my older child when they became 15 and a half. I was just excited and it was a bit of a blind spot for me. And I had to check myself because they were not at all interested in driving. And so again, kind of a small example, but it happens all the time. I hear parents, they'll share with me, like, I just don't get it. Like when I was that age, I wanted to do all these things and I couldn't wait to move out. Or when I was that age, I had already filled out all my college applications. Or when I was that, and so I think a lot of times as caregivers, we look back in our own experience and we pull that forward. Obviously, we're also hugely influenced by the culture in which we live, the environment, our families, the values that we have, the systems that we are a part of, and just simply societal norms, hugely influential in what we expect our kids to do at certain times. And that can cause a lot of conflict because parents feel pretty confused about why a child may not be interested in something or ready for something. So we may have to reframe, we may have to flex, we may have to hear more listen more deeply to where our child is at and reformulate, what we're thinking about going forward. So here's the slide with a bunch of words on it. All right. And just making a verbal note of what Kelsey shared. If we lose internet, if I suddenly go dark, or if anyone else in the panel goes dark, we will re convene at a later date, hopefully in early December. All right. So how have you had to reframe your expectations? What did you expect to happen that didn't happen? Or what do you still expect to happen that you're not sure may or may not happen? I mean, I expected when I had kids, I expected that they would go to school like I did. And I expected that I didn't expect to be paying for childcare at the age that my child is at, certainly as much of it as I am. So yeah, I've had to really shift my expectations. I expected all sorts of things to be different. And it's emotional. It can be emotional to step into this space. I'm curious if folks are finding that their expectations are contributing to stress in their homes. Yeah. So thanks for mentioning the relief there. Yeah. 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 This is great. Thank you guys for weighing in. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. People relating to some of these posts. I know I am. I expected my child to have sleepovers. I expected to have like Friday night pizza and lots of friends. And I just had this whole like vision when I had kids of what it was going to be like. And this is what we do. We talk about it, and we hopefully have someone in our life that we can share what this is like with. And if not, then that's why I've created spaces for us to do that. And a lot of other people have now too, which is nice. So it's not just about, I like how someone posted here, it's not just about your own expectations that you're reframing, but other people in your life, right? Like we don't parent in a vacuum. We don't caregive alone. we are often parts of communities, and so other adults may have thoughts, feelings, opinions about expectations, and they also could question our willingness or unwillingness to reframe what we expect of our kids. Now, this is an area that's pretty ripe for conflict in families. And it leads some individuals to feel pretty isolated. Yeah. Yeah. I love this because, talking about shame and guilt, right? We don't talk quite often enough about these things. So shame, guilt, and grief are the three things that I find parents are the least likely to bring up. But they are incredibly important to pull out of the shadows if we can. Normalize those. Yeah. Yeah. So different parenting approaches for sure. Changing my expectations about what kind of parent I would be. And I would add, off of Samantha's share is like also changing our expectations of how the people we parent with parent. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I know for me, this is where I had to shut down Facebook. This was, that's a personal story of mine, is that having to reframe my expectations about parenting and what my family life would be, that felt so hard at times, that being in the Facebook world and seeing all the images of families laughing and having fun, and I just, it was really hard for me. So that was an area where I really just gave myself permission to tap out. And I'm really glad I did, because I don't think it was useful for me. I really wanted to relearn how to think about our life as a family. Yeah. Yeah. Exhausting. Yeah. Explaining it to everyone. Yep. That's right. Yep. That's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sports. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I struggled to try to put some little shorts on social media for a while, and it was really hard for me. But one of the things that I talked about was having to reframe our expectations around soccer for our younger child. And because he started twerking on the field, and this was out of the blue. Just one day he's like playing soccer, and then he started kind of like shifting his pelvis and doing all these things, and the other parents thought he was dancing, and it was, oh my gosh, I knew he wasn't dancing. And so it ended up being really a good opportunity, I'll say, to shift our expectations around sports and how stressful it was for him to participate in the team. And yeah, whistles, touching, smells, pace, rain. Yes, everything. Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Yeah. This is great. Yeah. All the things, right? All the things that us as parents, some of you have experienced this already, but expectations are often, well, having a conversation with the young person directly around what they believe is reasonable in terms of an expectation, and trusting them. So for us, when our older child became of a certain age and maturity level, there were some really interesting conversations around, you know, I would say, but can you see this from my perspective? Like, can you see that removing all demands, removing all need for you to help with the dog, help around the house, do homework at home, like it just felt so unreasonable to me. However, my kid was saying, but that's what I need in order to be successful in school. And, I had a really hard time with that one. However, as soon as they graduated, it became very clear to me that they had been right because suddenly they were more able to show up in other ways. Their capacity was truly quite different. So looking back, that trust was worth it, but it was really tough at the time. All right. I'm going to move along to the next one here. All right. So I didn't have this word for many years in my parenting journey. And the word neuronormativity, I have found that to be incredibly helpful in defining something that I could never put my finger on, articulating what it was that felt was kind of always working against me in helping my kids. So I'm really glad that it's included in these principles. So rejecting neuronormativity, it really talks about the societal norms and what's expected of us and of our children. I really encourage people to stop thinking in terms of what's, the word appropriate comes to mind, the word expected, the word milestone, right? Like triggering for me because I would be so confused about but this is supposed to happen now. And what I didn't realize was that that doesn't mean anything. Sorry. But in this world, you don't get to know necessarily. You can guess, but you could also be wrong. And so rejecting that whole thing and saying, okay, that's just not going to work for us for a million reasons. And we can't necessarily control the fact that much of the systems we are involved in are, let's just say it, quite neuronormative. So we have to work with that quite a bit. And that is exhausting for caregivers because, again, it's like trying to, I'm trying to think of how to explain it differently, but anyway, I think you guys get it. I'm going to go to the next slide. So as soon as I got this word in my back pocket, I felt charged. I felt like this is a way that I can explain what I don't want to do, and this is a great way to identify who gets it. And it's not necessarily the people that I want to get it. And that's okay because not everyone's going to get it. But setting boundaries with family members, setting boundaries with our community is part of advocacy for in our caregiving, and also respecting our own limitations as caregivers, right? Like I can only do so much. So we're just going to stay home. We're not going to go over there, and we're not going to try to do that thing like we used to. Like I remember trying to do the fireworks thing because that's what our community really loved to do, right? And absolutely not. I finally just said, we are never going to do that ever again. And that felt so great. Just boom, we're done. We're out of that thing called fireworks or concerts or, even going out to dinner to a restaurant. Like, we're just not going to do that anymore. And so this has been empowering for me as a caregiver and as a clinician. Like I remind people all the time, like you get to choose. I mean, you may not get to choose everything, but you get to choose. And if it harms you or your energy, or harms your young people in your home, or harms your relationship with your partner in your parenting, like you don't have to do that. Other people may not understand, and you may not be able to control the story or the narrative. And that takes courage. So I talk a lot with families around, this is courage work. You have to tap into a place inside where you are willing to be misunderstood. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So this took me a long time, right, to come to. I mean, I would say that this principle more than anything else was that's why this has been 18 years in the making. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Siblings. That's a whole thing right there, right? Like how do we parent siblings differently? Really, really tough. And the bottom line is that not the kids they're not all going to get what they need all the time. It's just grief work, right? Letting go of that. It's really tough. Yeah. Not everyone's going to get it. Yeah. All right. We're making pretty good time. Feel free to throw any questions into the Q&A too, because I do have a chunk of time left at the end, which I think is super important to talk about caregiver wellness. So we're going to finish off our workshop in that area, but we only have one more of principles to go through. So feel free to, if you guys have questions or, you know, want to share anything else, feel free to put that in. I wasn't sure how much to share. I didn't want to blow everybody over and have, eyeballs kind of spinning in the back because it's such a big topic. But obviously I didn't want to share too little either. So tried to strike a balance. All right. I'm going to go to the next one, and then we can also just leave, just kind of open-ended chat open for any other things that come up for folks. May not be related to what we're talking about. Okay. Let me just go here to Andrew's question about teens and older kids. Rejecting normativity when it comes to teens and older kids. Could you ask a specific, offer a specific example? There's so much that I could talk about with teens and older kids. I mean, I think that this becomes very much a conversation with young people as they get older, and we get to talk with them when they just want to be normal. And there's regulation is big and dangerous. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So one of the things that I find most helpful in my work with young people, or like the older older section of young people, so like talking about teens and young adults, is using parts language. So that's a tip from a therapy model called IFS. And some of you guys may know about IFS, but it's a certain way of communicating that allows for multiple experiences all at the same time. And so, when I'm talking to a teen about their desire to be normal and how hard it is to have some of the challenges that may come along with their particular condition. So I'll just talk about parts. Like, yeah, it makes sense to me that a part of you would have a really tough time experiencing what you're going through right now. And tell me more about that. Right. So like really leaning into that and allowing them to share how hard it is. And that really is validation. So we may not be able to fix it, but we can certainly witness it. And I think that is understated as a caregiver role, is witnessing the experience of a neurodivergent individual in this society, right? Just witnessing that. Like, tell me more about what that's like. Saying things like that sounds incredibly hard. And I can't imagine what that must be like. And yeah, you have these parts that have huge feelings and or emotions or moods, right? Like moods come and moods go. And I know in our family, we talk a lot about moods and how unexpected they can be, and how, it's almost like the wind blows in a certain direction and the mood is different. And that can be incredibly jarring for an individual to have something feel so outside their control. So we talk about that. And so I guess, I say guidance around how to show up as a listener in that space. Excuse me. Yeah. All right. All right. So we come into adapting environments. Right. So looking at safety and security. When I think about environments, I always think about the nervous system. I think about stimulation and, excuse me, how different individuals experience stimulation differently. I mean, there's so many senses now. I mean, upwards of 30. I mean, there are other professionals, I think, in the audience that probably know better than me, but so much information coming out around how much stimulation from the environment is impacting the way that young people are moving through their day. Excuse me. And I think all you have to do is go into some of these spaces where kids gather and sit there as an adult. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is to observe in classrooms and big spaces where there's a lot of kids. I mean, holy cow, there's so much going on at any given moment. And, neurodivergent individuals experiencing processing information differently. Really, the energy depletion that happens. A lot of teens will tell me in my work, like, I'm so incredibly exhausted. I don't know how to keep going day after day. And I ask them, how do you spend your time? And based on how exhausted they are, they say, you'd think that I was, like running a marathon every day, but I'm just going to school and I'm going home and laying in my bed. And the degree of exhaustion that they're experiencing is so deep. And their family, are questioning, like, how can you possibly be this tired? Right? Like, you're not right? This is where parents can be, can get frustrated. It's like, you're not doing anything. Um, so understandably, the misunderstanding that happens there and the potential for conflict is huge. And so we really need to think creatively about adapting environments and providing accommodations. I think that goes without saying, but oftentimes we're just not providing enough. All right, so some tips around adapting the environment. Oh, a great comment from participant there. Oh, brilliant. That's a good one. I'm going to use that one. All right. How are we adapting the environment? I have a family that I work with. They took their kitchen tables out, the chairs, took the chairs out. I said, just take them out, right? Like, it was causing so much stress for the parents to keep getting their kids back in the seat during meals. It's just, why are we doing this? Why? And that was a huge pressure point. It was a release. They released themselves from that expectation and followed their kids' lead around moving and eating at the same time. And that is just one example. Yeah, brush daily. Great. Yep. Great. Yeah, so I shared some common challenges here, and these come up a lot. And I don't know about you guys, but an interesting thing I've observed is that sometimes the need for adaptations, right, is dictory to what the neurodivergent individual is doing, like their expectations for other people. And so especially our animals, I have to say, having pets is really interesting. Having pets and pets coming into my space, not mine, but my kid, let's say, too close, don't touch me, I don't want the pet on me, don't bump into me, I don't want the nose, don't lick me, da da da. And then, so yep, we move the animal away, but then the next thing you know, the kid is doing the same stuff to the dog, pinching, pulling, shove, pushing. I'm like, right, so just working with the environment and sometimes observing that it can be really tricky. It can be really tricky. I like thinking in terms of sensory safety. That to me is really helpful in conceptualizing this. So asking for feedback from my kids and asking them what about the environments that they're in outside of the home, if they're outside the home, and what about those environments they liked or didn't like, so that I can learn more about how to set things up. and really observing, because each child is so incredibly unique, right? So some kids will benefit greatly from having a crash pad in the living room, and another kid would really benefit from having some squish time, right, from a caregiver, right? So like heavy pressure on the body to help calm. Some kids hate being touched, and I have one of each. So I'm having to remember which kid I'm caregiving for, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, no, this one don't do that. No, do that for this one. Offer this, but not that. Offer that, not this. This one likes headphones. This one doesn't. This one loves audiobooks. This one can't stand anything being played on the music or anything like that. So it can be tricky, and I really feel for families having more than one child, more than two, more than three. Like this can get, like, adapting the environment can get really complex. Yeah. Yeah. That need for control. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, Being able to determine, I know for us, like a big adaptation was allowing for soft surfaces that my younger child can kick on, right? So like kicking is a big thing, just not hard, but just tapping, at the foot. And so there's so much pacing and tapping with the feet that we kind of set up our whole living room to work with that. My older child, when they were younger, trampoline was a huge fixture, like right in the middle of the house, and it was just constantly being used. And so I became really comfortable with that. Just and also as a caregiver, right? We have sensory needs as well, and sometimes the needs that we have really clash with the needs that our kids have. So understanding that our energy will deplete faster when we ourselves are overstimulated. And so understanding that our level of stimulation and what we need in our environment is also really important. Yeah. Thanks, Kelsey. You kind of touched on that, like our own well-being, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, really great point, and a great segue too, because we're going to move into caregiver wellness after this. But what about kids who don't like to talk about these topics, feelings, accommodations? Yeah, great question. So the question is, what about kids who don't like to talk about these topics, feelings, accommodations? Can you provide an age, just so I have kind of a rough idea? And so obviously, if a kid doesn't want to talk about something and is going to become shut down or, triggered or dysregulated through that, we don't want to press on it too much. 13, yeah, that makes sense. So sometimes what they call strewing, you guys may have heard of that, but strewing psychoed, right? So like some material around the house can be helpful so that individuals can come at it in their own time. No problem solving. Yeah. Yeah. And so I just normalize that and come at it like, yeah, that makes sense. It can bring up some uncomfortable feelings, may not be simply just not interested in that. And so it's really hard to solve problems for a 13-year-old or anyone, over that. It's hard to solve a problem if they aren't interested in talking about solving the problem. So I often just say, I'm completely available and here and ready. I'll try to be open for this when you're ready, but until then, you can't force it. So it comes down to coming up with a plan for like checking back in, like let me know when you're ready. I think parents, we want so badly to help our kids. We want so much to alleviate some of their experiences, like if they're suffering and struggling, our desire is to try to remove those obstacles or accommodate or provide. And we're not always going to be able to get it right. I think as parents, it's tough, to remember that we're still learning and communication can be really difficult. And especially for some neurodivergent individuals, right? Communication is, especially verbal communication, it may not be the way to go. So if there's any option to communicate differently, I always say, if there's a way to share a journal back and forth or write notes back and forth or use a whiteboard back and forth, highlighting something in a book and saying, like, hey, this might be interesting, and then leaving it there. And if there's interest, maybe they'll look in the book, but finding other ways to share back and forth besides just the direct person-to-person conversation can be helpful too. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, Rebecca, but if you want to talk more, reach out. All right. Any other questions out there or thoughts to share? We have about 11 minutes left. All right, you're welcome. All right, so moving on to caregiver wellness. Right, like there's a lot out there about self-care, so I'm not even gonna touch on that too much, but I think this is a really important topic to bring up anyway. I think of caregiver wellness a little differently than self-care. Because it's not trendy and it's not a manicure necessarily. It can be, but it's really about something deeper than that. But I always encourage people to try to tap into the way they feel in their bodies throughout the day and throughout their caregiving experiences. Where are you holding tension? Are you breathing? Are you pausing at all to think your own thoughts? Are you finding any pleasure at all in the day? Do you have moments of joy where you really feel full? Or are you incredibly depleted most of the time and truly in need of more support? Right. So here's a bunch of words and some things that I found helpful. Tried to make these easily accessible, something that anybody can do. Thanks, Audrey. I think the bottom line is that you're not always going to be there. We're not always going to be there. We just can't be always there. And again, a place of potential, feeling that loss of I'm not going to be able to do my caregiving in the way that I wish I could because of limitations, because of our own neurotype, because of demands, because of work, because of our own moods, maybe, right? So we do what we can when we can, and then try to let go if we can around what we haven't gotten to. Sorry about the dog. So, one of the things that I feel like might get lost for folks. Oh, I'm glad, Zach. I'm finding that a lot of people don't understand the importance of processing emotions and how the refusal of that, right? Like we call it compartmentalization. I mean, compartmentalizing is great when you have to. However, if all we do is compartmentalize and we never process painful feelings, we never process grief that we might be holding, we never process anger, frustration, resentment, sometimes hatred, disdain, uh, overwhelm, right? Like all these things, they're like it's like having food in our bodies and not digesting it, right? It's really important to try to digest some of these emotions so that they can move through us. And I found this interesting quote here. It wasn't a quote, it was kind of like a thing that made me think of this. Significant contributor to caregiver burnout is the avoidance of processing emotions. It's like, boom, that's really important. All right, we got to feel our feelings, even if we're doing that in the quietness of our own mind, although I know most minds are not quiet. But so takeaway one, this is a process, guys. It's going to change. It's going to keep changing. It's going to keep changing. And caregiver wellness is really important, but it has to work for you. Like someone else's version of that may not be your version, and that's completely okay. Right. But finding your version of that wellness, even if it's moment by moment instead of like big chunks of time. I mean, I have felt so pressured in my life to get away, to take a weekend, to travel. It's like, no, that is not my wellness. My wellness is moments throughout the day that I can check in with myself, feel my feelings, breathe. Of course, getting out is also super important, but it's not always possible. All right. Well, listen, this is such a pleasure to be here. I want to thank everybody for showing up and also just put a plug in for providing feedback for us so that we know what more you need going forward. So here's my little thank you slide. If anyone has any last questions or thoughts, feel free to throw those in.
I just want to thank Alexis and for everyone who attended. And I mean, this is why we're doing this. And so just, um, yeah, it's pretty cool. If I mean, on a personal level, it's pretty cool that, I mean, that was wonderful just as a parent for in a similar situation. So I'm so grateful for that. I want to thank everybody, thank Alexis. I also want to make sure y'all know that Alexis has like several community resources and is a practicing therapist. She's going to work with us and we're going to have a beautiful resource page in the coming days on our website. And so please make sure to check that out. That will be, and we'll follow up with an email, of course. But in the chat, that's going to be where you'll find resources, and that's going to be where the recording is, all that jazz. And if you have any questions about the event or want to connect with us or Alexis or anything, here's the email. I'm just going to hit you guys with a whole bunch of links. So
Yeah.
but then I want to talk about Alexis really quickly. So and I think she might speak to this as well. I just wanted to make sure that y'all know about this secure parenting community that she has. So there's a link there for that resource. And then her actual therapy site is here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think and you've got some QR codes, right? I think Alexis on the last
Yeah,
one.
I have this last
If
slide.
you
Yeah, I
just,
just threw this together. It's just
yeah,
neat.
I love a good
This has a
QR
QR
code.
code to the community. Yeah. So the next group will kick off in January. So anyone interested in that, feel free to reach out to me. I have a link on my website to set up a free conversation with me, so parents or caregivers can really find out if it's the right fit or not. And I welcome you to take advantage of it. Yeah, so reach out to me if you'd like to talk further. Thank you again. Thanks, Kelsey, and thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Alexis, if you can go, can you go to the last slide just before everybody leaves? Just if people like the QR code as well. It really helps us out if y'all can help us inform these sessions and give us feedback on these events. It's shaped where we've changed it for this year. Like I mean, in the rest of 2025, we've got one more session, like Katie mentioned, with Emily McMason coming up. And then in 2025, we're going to have Alexis back, which is we're so excited about. And then we also have some information and speakers coming in about gender diversity and other resources for caregivers and student support. And that is all because we receive feedback from the community. So please do not hesitate. Send us an email, use the form, let us know. Katie, I saw that you unmuted. Are you good? Do you want?
Oh, good. No, thanks everybody for being
Wonderful.
here. Give us
Yeah.
your feedback if you have the time and inclination. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, all parents and caregivers. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Thanks for being in community with this. I don't know who said it. Whoever said how validating that was, that chat was like a warm hug.
Yeah. Let's keep
Oh,
it going.
it just feels so isolating sometimes, right? And
Oh,
so it's just, yeah, thank you, Audrey and Dane. All the sharing was wonderful.
it's
Thank you
great.
all.
Love the chat. Yeah, so
Yeah.
great.
Yay. And the internet. The
Yeah.
storm did not kick us out. Yay. That's one thing that isn't a trigger for my little guy. I think, like Owen thinks that blackouts are the coolest thing of all time. Gets his blackout box out and is like pumped. It's like when the power comes back on, he's like, "Aw,
Oh man.
yeah, this isn't fun."
I know I've heard about those bug out bags.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love, well, you must know about outdoor educating, like this bug out bag idea. And so I came up with this little thing with parents around creating their own bug out bag. And so we do it like in our group around, what do you need in your bag? And anyway, super fun. This concept of like your blackout box,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah,
A bug out bag. That's good.
totally. Well, a dad mentioned it once, and I was like, okay.